I'm pleading not guilty to the charges of premeditated murder.
It's an unusual defense from an unusual source. Ronnie Oneal III is on trial for killing his girlfriend and their daughter in 2018, and he's chosen to defend himself in a Florida courtroom. He seemed to take many people, including the judge, off guard by shouting his opening statement to the jury.
And the evidence is going to show that law enforcement tampered with evidence to meet their such high burden of proof.
Prosecutors say Oneal shot his girlfriend Kenyatta Barron while their daughter watched. He then returned to his home and turned on his 9-year-old special needs daughter, killing her with a hatchet. His son, now 11, testified as a key witness after police said he was in the home when his father attacked him, his mother, and sister, and then set the home on fire.
The evidence is going to show I love my children. And the evidence is going to prove to you that this whole entire case has been tampered with and fabricated. Before it's all said and done.
O'Neal's trial.
She called 911 while she was already wounded. Kenyatta Barron was still alive when she reached for help. It was late at night in Riverview, Florida. The kind of hour when most homes are quiet. Families are asleep. Children are in their rooms. Neighbors are behind closed doors, unaware that just a few feet away, a mother is fighting for her life. Then the call comes in. Kenyatta is screaming. She says she has been shot. She begs for help. She pleads. She apologizes. And in the background, the man who should have protected that family is not protecting anyone. His name is Ronnie Oneal III. To the public, this case would later become known because of him. Because of his trial. Because of his screaming in court. Because he chose to represent himself. Because he questioned his own surviving son in front of a jury. But before the courtroom, before the headlines, before the clips that spread across the internet, there was Kenyatta, a 33-year-old mother. A woman known to loved ones as Kiki. A woman whose children were her world. And on March 18, 2018, inside and around that family home, her world was destroyed. Her 9-year-old daughter, Ronnie Oneal, a child with special needs who could not speak, would be killed. Her 8-year-old son would be stabbed, burned, and left with injuries so severe that first responders did not know if he would survive. The house would be set on fire. And Ronnie Oneal III would later stand in court, look at the evidence, challenge the witnesses, attack the investigation, and try to tell a story the jury did not believe. But there was one person he could not silence. His son. The little boy who survived. The child who was never supposed to walk out of that house alive. And when that boy finally spoke in court, his words were simple. Clear. Devastating. Before we go deeper, tell us where you are watching from. Because cases like this remind us that sometimes the most dangerous place for a victim is not a dark road, not a parking lot, not a stranger's car. Sometimes it is the home everyone else thinks is safe. And if you are new here, welcome to Dark Trace Crime Stories. We tell these stories with respect for the victims, with outrage for what was done to them, and with the facts that brought the truth into the light. If you're into real, in-depth true crime stories, make sure you subscribe to Dark Trace Crime Stories. Because this case is one you won't forget. This is the story of Kenyatta Barron. And this is the night her own voice became evidence. Kenyatta Barron was 33 years old when she died. The people who loved Kenyatta did not remember her as a headline. They remembered her as a mother. Kenyatta had children with Ronnie Oneal III. Their daughter, Ronnie, was 9 years old. She had special needs and could not speak. But silence does not mean absence. Her family remembered her personality. Her clothes. Her bows. Her presence. The way she was loved even without words. Their son was 8 years old at the time. A child young enough to still believe that home should mean safety. Young enough to still depend on the adults around him. Young enough that no child should ever be asked to explain murder, fire, blood, and betrayal. Kenyatta's mother, Carrie Lloyd, would later speak in court with the kind of grief no parent should ever carry. She said Kenyatta and Ronnie were lights in her life. Angels taken from the family. And that is where this story begins. Not with Ronnie Oneal's courtroom performance. Not with his claims. Not with the viral clips. It begins with a mother and her children. A family. A home. And a night that turned that home into a crime scene. Ronnie Oneal III was Kenyatta's boyfriend or ex-boyfriend. They were connected through their children, and by March 18, 2018, that connection had become the center of one of the most disturbing family murder cases in Florida. Before trial, Oneal tried to claim that Kenyatta was the danger. He claimed she had attacked him. He tried to use Florida's stand your ground law to argue that he was justified in killing her. But the court rejected that. The evidence did not support the version he wanted the world to believe. And once the case reached trial, prosecutors laid out a very different picture. A picture built from Kenyatta's 911 call, a neighbor's testimony, the surviving child's memory, physical evidence from the home, medical evidence, fire evidence, and Oneal's own words. By the end, this was not a story of confusion. It was not a story where no one knew what happened. It was a story where the only surviving child from the house lived long enough to say what his father did. Now take yourself to Riverview, Florida, on March 18, 2018. It is late. The neighborhood is quiet. And then, at about 11:43 p.m., Kenyatta Barron calls 911. The emergency has already begun. She is not calling because she is afraid something may happen later. She is calling because it is happening now. She tells dispatch she has been shot. She is screaming. She is crying. She is pleading for help. And through that call, the horror becomes real. Not as a theory. Not as a police report. As sound. As panic. As a mother trying to survive. The call captured her saying she was shot. It captured her begging for help. It captured her apologizing. It captured her saying he was attacking her. And behind the voice of the victim, the state later argued, was the voice and presence of Ronnie Oneal III. At that point, the clock is moving fast. Every second matters. Kenyatta is wounded. She is still alive. She is trying to get help. And inside that home, her children are still there. Her son would later tell the court what he remembered. He saw his father holding a shotgun. He saw his mother screaming. He said his mother ran into his sister's room and into a closet. Think about that image. A mother, already trapped inside the violence, moving through the home while her child watches. A shotgun in the hands of the man inside the house. A little boy seeing things no child should ever see. According to court records, Oneal ran after Kenyatta with the shotgun. The evidence later found inside the home supported parts of that account. Investigators found damage and projectiles consistent with shotgun fire. They found shotgun-related evidence. They found Kenyatta's blood. The home itself was beginning to tell the story. But Kenyatta did not stay inside. She moved out. She tried to get away. And this is where the horror spills beyond the walls of the home and reaches the neighbor's door. A neighbor's then-fiancé, James Gray, heard loud screaming and loud banging at the front door. He opened the door and stepped out. What he saw was not a disagreement. It was not a private argument. It was not something that could be explained away as noise. He saw blood spatter along the walls of the foyer area. He saw Kenyatta on the ground, face down, unresponsive. And he saw Ronnie Oneal standing over her. Oneal was holding her left arm. Something was in his right hand. Gray tried to get him to move away from her. But Oneal continued shouting. Then, according to the testimony, Oneal dropped Kenyatta's arm and went back toward his own residence. Kenyatta never regained consciousness. That detail is unbearable because just minutes earlier, she had been alive enough to call for help. Alive enough to scream. Alive enough to ask someone to save her. And now she was on the ground, face down, outside the home, no longer responding. The medical examiner would later describe the force used against her. Kenyatta had suffered gunshot wounds and severe trauma. Her arm was broken. Her face and upper body showed violence beyond the initial shooting. Pieces of the shotgun were found nearby. The weapon had been broken or disassembled. This was not a single moment of violence. It was an attack that continued. It escalated. It followed her. And while Kenyatta was outside, her children were still trapped in the nightmare. Inside the house was Ronnie, 9 years old, a child with special needs, a child who could not speak. She could not call 911 the way her mother did. She could not scream for help the way another child might. She could not explain what was happening. And according to prosecutors and the surviving child's testimony, Ronnie Oneal turned on her too. The boy later testified that after his mother was attacked, his father returned to the home. He said Oneal grabbed Ronnie, dragged her, and struck her with an axe or hatchet. The courtroom would later hear that Ronnie was killed in a way so cruel that even the judge, after years on the bench, struggled to speak about it without emotion. This is where the story becomes almost impossible to carry. Because Ronnie was not a threat. She was not part of an argument. She was not someone who could defend herself. She was a vulnerable child in the care of the adults who were supposed to protect her. And in that house, on that night, she was betrayed by one of them in the worst possible way. The violence did not stop there. The surviving son, only 8 years old, was still inside. According to his testimony, Oneal spread gasoline in the house. Then fire entered the story. The boy said his father tried to set him on fire. He said he managed to get up and run. Then he was stabbed. When officers arrived, the house was burning. The child emerged from the home terribly injured. He had stab wounds. He had burns. He was bleeding. His injuries were so severe that first responders knew they were looking at a child fighting for life. This is the part that stays with you. A little boy walking out of a burning home after his mother and sister had been killed. A child who had seen the violence, survived the blade, survived the fire, and still had enough life in him to speak. Before he was airlifted for emergency treatment, he told responders what happened. His father had shot his mother. That statement became one of the earliest pieces of truth from the only surviving child. And if you are watching this and feeling angry, you should. Because this is not just sad. This is a complete collapse of the one place children are supposed to be safe. If you have watched this far, comment justice for Kenyatta and Ronnie. Not because a comment fixes what happened, but because their names should not disappear behind the man who killed them. Now the scene belongs to law enforcement, firefighters, medical teams, investigators, and eventually prosecutors. The home is on fire. Kenyatta is outside, unresponsive. Ronnie is inside. The boy is barely alive. And Ronnie Oneal is still there. Officers testified that when Oneal came out of the garage area, he smelled like gasoline. He had blood on his hands and clothing. He made statements claiming Kenyatta was the devil, and that the children were the devil's children. He also claimed he had been attacked. At about 11:49 p.m., only minutes after Kenyatta's 911 call, Oneal himself called 911. He claimed Kenyatta had tried to kill him. He said he had killed her. But the evidence would not stop at his version. The evidence was everywhere. The 911 call. The neighbor who saw Kenyatta on the ground. The blood. The shotgun pieces. The fire. The injuries to the children. The surviving boy's account. The medical examiner's findings. The crime scene photographs. The weapons and weapon fragments. The gasoline. The burns. The house itself had become a witness. And Ronnie Oneal III was arrested. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Kenyatta Barron and Ronnie Oneal. He was charged with attempted first-degree murder for the attack on his son. He was also charged with aggravated child abuse, arson, and resisting an officer without violence. That meant the man accused of killing Kenyatta, killing Ronnie, and trying to kill his son would stand in court not only as the defendant, but as his own voice. He gave his own opening statement. He challenged the state. He accused investigators of tampering with evidence. He claimed 911 recordings were falsified. He claimed his son's statements were inconsistent. He claimed the case had been built on lies. And through it all, the jury had to sit and listen while the evidence came in piece by piece. The 911 call, the neighbor's testimony, the medical evidence, the fire evidence, the testimony of officers and investigators. And then came the witness no one could ignore, his surviving son. By the time of trial, the boy was 11 years old. 3 years had passed since the night he walked out of that burning home. He had survived injuries that could have killed him. He had lost his mother. He had lost his sister. He had been adopted and given a new family, a new sense of safety, and eventually a new last name. But in court, he still had to go back to that night. He testified remotely. He told jurors what he remembered. He said he saw his father holding a shotgun. He said his mother was screaming. He described seeing his mother run. He described what happened to his sister. He described the fire. He described the attack on him. And then Ronnie Oneal, representing himself, was allowed to question him. Imagine the weight of that moment. A child sitting there, already having survived the unimaginable, now being questioned by the father accused of doing it.
Something bad happened to your mother and your sister.
Yes.
He was then just 8 years old, but remembers his mother and father arguing.
I just saw my dad holding a shotgun and my mom.
The state says Oneal shot Kenyatta Barron. He then beat her to death with the shotgun and then grabbed an axe. Oneal's son says he saw his father then kill his sister.
He hit her in the back in the axe and then in the head, and then there was blood everywhere.
Oneal's son says his father then attacked him.
He put me on the ground, and then he had his foot on top. I was laying on my stomach. He had his foot on top of me, and he was holding me down, and he was lighting a match.
The state contends Oneal set his son on fire, then grabbed the knife and cut him open. Oneal is acting as his own attorney.
How you doing?
And had a chance to question his own son about what happened that night.
And how did I hurt you?
Oneal tried to point out inconsistencies. He tried to challenge the boy's memory. He tried to create doubt. But then he asked the question that made the testimony unforgettable. He asked whether he had hurt him that night. The boy answered yes. Then Oneal asked how. And the boy said, "You stabbed me." That was the moment the courtroom could not escape. No dramatic theory could erase it. No shouting could drown it out. No accusation against investigators could make it disappear. A child had survived his father. And the child said what happened. The trial continued with Oneal pushing his version. He claimed he had acted in response to Kenyatta. He tried to suggest that she was responsible for Ronnie's death and the attack. He argued that the evidence was manipulated. He attacked the credibility of the investigation. But the state had Kenyatta's own 911 call. The state had the neighbor. The state had the physical evidence. The state had the medical evidence. The state had the surviving child. And the state had the timeline. During closing arguments, Oneal made a statement that stunned many people watching the case. He admitted killing Kenyatta Barron. But even then, he tried to control how the jury understood it. He said he killed her, but he wanted them to tell it like it is. He denied killing his daughter and denied trying to kill his son. It was a strategy built on separating the crime into pieces. Accept one part. Deny the rest. Accuse the dead. Challenge the living. Blame the investigation. But the jury did not accept it. On June 21, 2021, Ronnie Oneal III was found guilty on all counts. Guilty of first-degree murder for killing Kenyatta Barron. Guilty of first-degree murder for killing Ronnie Oneal. Guilty of attempted first-degree murder for the attack on his son. Guilty of aggravated child abuse. Guilty of arson. Guilty of resisting an officer without violence. After years of waiting, the verdict came back clearly. The boy had lived to testify. The evidence had held. And Kenyatta's voice on that 911 call had not been buried with her. But the case was not over. Because prosecutors had sought the death penalty. That meant the trial moved into a sentencing phase, where the jury had to decide whether Ronnie Oneal should be sentenced to death or life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the time, Florida law required the jury to be unanimous to recommend death. During this phase, the defense presented mental health evidence. A psychologist testified that Oneal had been diagnosed with PTSD and delusional disorder. His mother also testified about a previous drive-by shooting that had nearly killed him months before the murders. But the question for the jury was not whether his life had contained trauma. It was whether the crimes met the standard for death. At least one juror did not vote for death. So the jury recommended life without parole. For Kenyatta's family, that decision was painful. Carrie Lloyd, Kenyatta's mother, wanted the death penalty. She believed Oneal had taken angels from the family. She was devastated by the way he had behaved in court. She said he had made a mockery of the justice system by representing himself, yelling, and blaming Kenyatta. That pain is easy to understand. Because for the family, the courtroom was not just law. It was the last place where Kenyatta and Ronnie could be publicly defended. It was the place where the evidence had to speak for them. It was the place where the man convicted of killing them still had the right to speak. Then came the final sentencing. Judge Michelle Cisco had listened to the trial. She had seen the evidence. She had heard the testimony. She had watched the case unfold in her courtroom. And when she spoke, she did not sound untouched by it. She said that in 19 years on the bench, it was the worst case she had ever seen as far as the facts went. She spoke about being haunted by the evidence. She spoke about the cruelty. And much of her emotion focused on Ronnie, a child who could not scream, a child who could not run, A child who had already faced challenges in life, only to be betrayed in the final moments by a parent. Then the sentence came down. 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Plus 90 years. 30 years for arson. 30 years for one aggravated child abuse count. 30 years for the other aggravated child abuse count. The legal message was clear. Ronnie Oneal III would not walk free. But even that kind of sentence cannot restore what was taken. It cannot give Carrie Lloyd back her daughter and granddaughter. It cannot give Kenyatta Barron back her sister. It cannot give Ron Nivea back the life she should have lived. It cannot give the surviving boy the childhood he had before March 18, 2018. And still, in the middle of all that darkness, there was one part of the story that did not end in death. The boy survived. Detective Mike Blair, one of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office detectives connected to the case, later became part of that child's life. That night, Blair was called to the scene. He later said that by the time he arrived, they were told a child was being airlifted to Tampa General Hospital and was not expected to live. But the child did live. Against what seemed possible, he survived. Over time, Detective Blair and his wife, Danielle, adopted him.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Mr. Oneal,
All right.
Listen, stop.
All right.
Listen to me.
I'm not
You're not going to raise your voice again.
I'm not going to raise my voice again. I'm not.
I will have you removed from this courtroom. I can sentence you without you being present.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't conduct
I
yourself.
understand, Your Honor.
Thank you.
But I will say, I'm sorry for your loss.
19 years I've been at this job. I've seen human beings killed at the hands of others in every way imaginable. You name it, I've seen it. Shootings, stabbings, drownings, suffocatings, blown apart by cars, some DUI manslaughter cases, horrible things. This is the worst case I have ever seen as far as the facts go. When the person from fire department, when he testified, and when he said that he retrieved the body of Ronnie Oneal from the home, and all he could do was sob. It took every ounce I had not to start sobbing too. Because there is no way any person with any feeling could have witnessed or seen the photos of what occurred that night and not be haunted for the rest of your life.
The boy who had once carried the name Ronnie Oneal later became known publicly as Ronnie Blair. That change matters, because names can carry pain. And for him, a new name became part of a new chapter. He was not only the child from the crime scene, not only the witness, not only the victim who survived. He became part of a family that chose him. He later spoke publicly about feeling safe and loved. And after everything Ronnie Oneal III tried to destroy, that matters. It does not erase the murders. It does not soften the brutality. It does not turn the story into something happy. But it proves that Oneal did not get the final word over that child's life. The boy lived. He healed enough to speak. He testified. He was believed. And he carried forward the truth his mother and sister could no longer tell. Years later, Oneal appealed his convictions and sentences. But in 2023, the appellate court affirmed the judgment. The convictions stood. The sentences stood. The legal case remained closed. And what remains now is memory. Kenyatta Barron should not be remembered only as Ronnie Oneal's girlfriend. She was a mother, a daughter, a sister, a woman who loved her children, a woman who reached for help while she was still alive, a woman whose last recorded moments showed fear, pain, and the instinct to survive. Ron Nivea Oneal should not be remembered only as a victim in a criminal charge. She was a 9-year-old child, a girl loved by her family, a child with her own presence, her own personality, her own place in that home. She could not speak, but her life still speaks through the people who loved her and through the justice that named what was done to her. And the surviving son should not be remembered only for what he endured. He should be remembered for surviving, for walking out of that burning house, for telling responders what happened, for facing the courtroom, for answering clearly when his father tried to question him, for becoming more than the worst night of his life. This case became known because of Ronnie Oneal's courtroom performance. But that should never be the center of the story. The center is Kenyatta calling 911. The center is Ron Nivea, a child who should have been safe. The center is a boy who lived long enough to tell the truth. And the center is a family that lost 2 generations in one night. So as we close, remember their names. Kenyatta Barron, Ron Nivea Oneal, and remember the child who survived. If this story moved you, like this video, share it, and subscribe to Dark Trace Crime Stories. We tell these stories not to glorify the killers, but to keep the victims' names alive and to make sure the truth does not disappear behind the noise. Because in the end, Ronnie Oneal's voice was loud in court. But Kenyatta's 911 call, Ron Nivea's silence, and one little boy's testimony spoke louder.